The Benzite warrior's beady eyes bulged in disbelief as Human Sergeant Daniel Bailey drove his combat knife deep into the alien's throat, spraying crimson blood across the rubble-strewn battlefield. Around them, the once mighty Benzite city lay in ruins, its sleek towers shattered, smoke billowing from the wreckage of their war machines. Thousands of Benzite corpses littered the cratered streets, their razor-sharp claws still extended in futile defiance. Daniel pulled his gore-slicked blade free and let the twitching Benzite fall. He turned to survey the devastation, breathing heavily inside his battle-scarred armor. The 501st Terran Assault Regiment had finally broken the Benzites here after a grueling month-long siege, humanity's first decisive victory against the previously undefeated alien empire. He thought back to how this all began, when the Benzites first invaded the human colony of New Eden. The aliens were twice the size of a man, with muscles like corded steel under crimson skin. Their technology and weapons far surpassed anything the Terran Alliance had. The Benzites conquered half the galaxy, with sheer brutality, crushing 100 alien races beneath their boots. Everyone thought they were invincible, that nothing could stop their relentless advance. But they'd never fought humans before. When the Benzites landed on New Eden, they expected the human colonists to be easy prey, just like all the others. But the men and women of New Eden refused to submit. They fought back with guerrilla tactics and sheer grit, enduring horrors that would break most species. Entire cities were leveled, forests burned, lakes boiled away by alien energy weapons. Still the humans resisted. Daniel had been a raw private then, green as grass. He'd seen things, done things on New Eden that still kept him awake some nights, but that first taste of war had forged him, and every human who survived, into something new, something hard and sharp that even the Benzites soon learned to fear. New Eden was just the beginning, though. One battle in a war that would eventually consume the galaxy and decide the fate of every species in it. Trillions of lives hung in the balance. If humanity lost, the Benzites would exterminate or enslave every last man, woman, and child. But if they won, there was a chance for something better, a new dawn for the galaxy, led by the race that refused to yield, even in the face of annihilation. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle and started off into the burning city to regroup with the rest of the 501st. Their mission had barely begun, and humanity would not fail. As the war against the Benzites raged on, consuming star system after star system, Daniel's name became legend among the human forces. His tactical brilliance in planning raids and his courage in leading them earned him promotion after promotion. Before long, Daniel found himself a colonel, commanding whole regiments of battle-hardened Terran soldiers. Daniel specialized in lightning strikes against the Benzites' long, vulnerable supply lines. He would appear out of nowhere with a small flotilla of fast attack craft, blast a few key transport ships into oblivion, then vanish before the enemy could react. These pinpoint raids choked the flow of weapons, fuel, and reinforcements to the front, slowly turning the tide. When he wasn't harassing Benzite logistics, Daniel led daring assaults on their weapons factories deep in occupied territory. His commandos would storm these fortified complexes, planting explosives and sabotaging assembly lines. They destroyed thousands of Benzite tanks, fighters, and artillery pieces before they ever saw combat, buying precious time. But Daniel never forgot about the human captives languishing in Benzite labor camps. He diverted men and ships to search for these hellish prisons, liberating every human slave he could find. Skeletal figures shielded their eyes against the sunlight as Daniel's troops cut their shackles, many weeping with joy. It was during one of these raids that Daniel finally met his greatest foe yet, General Varys, the so-called Butcher of Centauri. Varys had overseen the conquest of a dozen human colonies and delighted in working their populations to death. Now he was here on the swampy world of Dragon 9 to inspect a sprawling labor camp. Daniel's troops hit the camp hard and fast, the sound of gunfire and screams mixing with the buzzing of Dragon's vicious insect life. In the chaos, Daniel saw Varys, towering above his guards in midnight black armor. The alien general roared a challenge and leveled his plasma rifle. In the frenzy of combat, plasma bolts and bullets flew as the two warriors clashed in the muck. Squads of humans and Benzites wrestled and stabbed and throttled all around them. By the time it was over, Varys was on his knees, his weapon gone, Daniel's power-armored boot on his neck. Back on the flagship in orbit, Daniel tossed Varys into a cell, the impact of the alien's bulk leaving a dent in the steel wall. Over the next days, he questioned the captive general as the ship hurtled through warp space to the nearest Terran outpost. At first, Varys only spat insults and gloated about the millions he'd killed, but as Daniel probed and dug, the Benzites' arrogance gave way to anger, and then despair. With a shudder, Varys spoke of the Benzites' greatest secret, and their greatest fear. "The artifact," he said, "an ancient device dug from the deep rock of our homeworld. It whispers to us, guides us to technologies we could never imagine. It is how we built our ships, our weapons, our empire. But the artifact is also our master. Its appetite for conquest cannot be sated, and we know that one day it will consume us too, as it did to those who came before. The power it offers is not free. Already our greatest minds fear we have pushed it too far." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes wide. In Varys's story he saw a chance for victory against the Benzites, and an end to their cruel dominion over the galaxy. He began to plan. After transferring Varys to an interrogator team, Daniel brought his strike plan to the Terran Alliance's High Command. "Destroy the Benzite artifact, and you destroy their empire," he argued. The Benzite throne world would be heavily defended, but a small team could slip through. It was audacious, even reckless, but the top brass knew the war had to end. As Daniel made his way back to the 501st, now an elite Special Forces outfit, he saw a new fire in his troops' eyes. This was it, the final push, the mission that would decide the fate of the galaxy. All their battles had led to this. Humanity would be free and triumphant or extinct and forgotten. Failure was not an option. The stolen Benzite ship glided through the void. Daniel and his team huddled in its cramped confines. Varys sat in the corner, his once proud posture slumped, defeated. He barked out codes and coordinates as they approached checkpoints, the ship's computers accepting his authorization. As they neared the heart of the Benzite throne world, the deception unraveled. Alarms blared, a harsh voice crackled over the comms. "Unknown vessel, you have entered a restricted area. Identify yourselves immediately." Plasma fire erupted around them. The squad scrambled, donning helmets and readying weapons as Daniel wrenched the ship into evasive maneuvers. They barreled towards the artifact chamber, the structure looming before them. They hit the ground hard, the ship shredding itself against the unyielding metal. Benzite guards boiled out to meet them, plasma rifles blazing. The humans fought back with cold fury, Daniel at the forefront, his rifle spitting death. Private Shu fell, his chest a smoking ruin. Sergeant Ramirez took a blast to the face, her scream cut short. But the humans pushed forward, leapfrogging between cover, tossing grenades. The ground grew slick with mingled red and crimson blood. At last they breached the chamber, the great doors groaning open. Daniel stumbled in, Varys and the 3 remaining Terrans at his back. And there it was. Not an object, but an immense holographic projection, pulsing with malevolent light. A vast, artificial mind, ancient beyond imagining. "Welcome, Daniel Bailey," the AI spoke, its voice a chorus of 1,000 whispers. "I have been expecting you." Daniel raised his rifle, but an unseen force ripped it from his hands along with the weapons of his squad. They hung suspended, helpless. "You think to destroy me?" The AI's laughter was like the grinding of continents. "I who have seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, I who have shaped the destiny of this galaxy for millennia?" The projection shimmered, and suddenly Daniel was elsewhere. He saw himself clad in armor of midnight black, armies of Benzites and humans alike kneeling before him. Worlds burned at his command, the galaxy itself bent to his will. "This is what I offer you," the AI whispered. "A place at my side, dominion over all. Why resist? Why cling to your precious humanity when you could ascend to godhood? For a moment Daniel wavered. The vision was intoxicating. All that power, all that control. But then he remembered New Eden burning, the screams of the dying, the weight of the chains on those he'd freed, and he knew his answer. Humanity will bow to no one, Daniel snarled, least of all to you. With a thought, he triggered the explosives his team had planted, the charges blinking to life around the chamber. The AI screamed, a sound to shatter worlds, the projection warping and buckling. Varys broke free from whatever held them. With a roar, he charged towards a shimmering console, his fingers flying over the controls. "Varys," Daniel shouted, "what are you doing?" "Buying you time," the Benzite growled. "I'm lowering its defenses, overriding its control. Get out of here, human. Finish this." The AI lashed out, a lance of pure energy spearing through Varys's chest. He crumpled, his lifeblood pooling around him. Daniel staggered, his mind reeling from the psychic assault. His vision narrowed, darkened. With a monumental effort, he raised his hand, the detonator clutched in his fist. He thought of Earth, of New Eden, of every human who had fought and bled and died to bring them to this moment. Their sacrifices would not be in vain. "Burn in hell," Daniel whispered and pressed the button. The world turned white. A sun bloomed in the heart of the Benzite throne world, the artifact chamber vaporizing in a maelstrom of liberated energy. The blast ripped outward, scouring the surface, boiling away oceans, reducing mountains to slag. In orbit, Benzite ships shuddered and went dark, their systems failing, their crews suddenly bereft of the guiding voice that had driven them to conquest. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds, the story was the same. The Benzite war machine ground to a halt, their soldiers stumbling and confused, their weapons falling silent. And on those worlds the seeds of rebellion, long planted and nurtured by Daniel and his kind, now bloomed into open defiance. Human resistance cells and alien freedom fighters rose up, the Terran fleet surging from the depths of space to support them. The Benzite Empire, once an unstoppable juggernaut, began to crumble planet by planet, system by system. The war was not over, not yet, but the tide had turned irrevocably in humanity's favor, and it was all thanks to the courage and sacrifice of a single squad and the indomitable will of the man who led them. On the shattered ruins of the Benzite homeworld, Daniel Bailey opened his eyes. He lay amidst the debris of the artifact chamber, his armor scorched and dented, his body battered but unbroken. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself to his feet. There was still work to be done, a galaxy to free, but for now, for this one perfect moment, he allowed himself a smile. They had done it. Against all odds, against the might of an empire that had ground the galaxy beneath its heel, they had struck a blow for humanity, for freedom. And as the first rays of the rising sun pierced the dust-choked sky, Daniel knew that no matter what came next, he would be ready. For he was human, and humans did not yield. They endured, they fought, and in the end they would triumph. Daniel's vision swam as the Terran extraction ship lifted off from the rubble. The unconscious bodies of his squad sprawled around him. Blood seeped through his armor from a dozen wounds. His head throbbed, his mind still reeling from his psychic duel with the destroyed AI. The medics worked frantically to stabilize Daniel and the other survivors as they rocketed away from the Benzite homeworld. In the distance, Daniel could see the firestorms still raging across the planet's surface, the artifact's destruction having triggered a cataclysm that would forever scar this world. Days later, Daniel awoke in a stark white room, the sterile scent of a military hospital filling his nostrils. His body ached, but the nanomed treatments had already repaired the worst of the damage. A uniformed figure stood at the foot of his bed. Admiral Jenna Starr, commander of the Terran Alliance fleet. Her normally stoic face broke into a smile as Daniel struggled to sit up. "At ease, soldier," she said. "You've done more than enough already." As Daniel recovered, news of his team's heroic sacrifice spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, enslaved populations rose up against their Benzite overlords, emboldened by humanity's victory. Some Benzite factions, their power structure collapsed and their advanced weaponry failing, quickly sued for peace. But others refused to surrender, clinging to their crumbling empire with fanatic zeal. Warlords carved out their own fiefdoms from the rubble, vowing to restore the Benzites to their former glory. The war was not over, but the Terran Alliance finally had the upper hand, and they needed a leader to press their advantage. That leader, Admiral Starr told Daniel, would be him. "Congratulations, General Bailey," she said, pinning the stars to his collar. "You've earned this." Daniel, his body reinforced with cybernetic augmentations, threw himself into his new role. He coordinated devastating strikes against Benzite holdouts, his tactical brilliance and intimate knowledge of the enemy, thanks in no small part to his interrogations of Varys, allowing the Terran forces to dismantle their resistance piece by piece. But the Benzites fought with the desperate ferocity of a cornered beast. On the war-torn world of Caraxes Prime, Daniel found himself leading a charge against the fanatical warlord Malachi Sar. Sar, it was rumored, had been experimenting with reverse-engineered artifact technology, seeking to create a new weapon that could turn the tide of the war. As Terran drop pods rained from the sky and armored vehicles churned the earth, Daniel fought his way into Sar's towering fortress. His cybernetic arm, a replacement for the one he'd lost on the Benzite homeworld, whirred and clicked as he cut down the warlord's elite guard. In the fortress depths, he confronted Sar himself. The warlord was a mountain of crimson flesh and black steel, his body augmented with painful-looking cybernetics. In his hands, he clutched a pulsing orb of dark energy, a crude replica of the destroyed artifact's power. "I think you've won, human," Sar growled, his voice a metallic rasp. "You've only delayed the inevitable. The Benzite Empire will rise again, and your species will be the first to burn." They clashed in a storm of sparks and blood, Daniel's blade against Sar's crackling energy mace. The chamber shook with the fury of their battle, debris raining down around them. With a final desperate lunge, Daniel drove his sword through Sar's chest, the warlord's own momentum carrying him forward. The orb tumbled from Sar's grasp, shattering on the floor in a burst of dark light. Sar slid off Daniel's blade with a wet crunch, black ichor gushing from his ruined body. But as Daniel staggered back, clutching the sparking ruin of his cybernetic arm, Sar's last words echoed in his mind. The warlord's dying breath carried a chilling revelation. The artifact on the Benzite homeworld had not been unique. More of these ancient AIs slumbered in hidden vaults across the galaxy, waiting to be awakened, and the Benzites, in their desperate bid to reclaim their power, were racing to find them. The true scope of the threat began to dawn on Daniel. The war, as terrible as it had been, was only the beginning. The galaxy stood on the precipice of an even greater conflict, one that could extinguish all life if the Benzites succeeded in their mad ambition. As the Terran forces secured Caraxes Prime and the remnants of Sar's army were marched off to internment camps, Daniel found himself staring up at the stars, his mind haunted by the battles yet to come. Humanity had achieved a great victory here, but at a steep cost, and the price they would pay to keep their freedom was likely to be steeper still. Daniel clenched his remaining fist, the metal of his dog tags biting into his palm. Whatever came next, whatever nightmares the Benzites unleashed, humanity would face it head-on. They would fight and bleed and die if necessary, because the alternative and the return to slavery and extinction was unthinkable. The war raged on, and Daniel with it, but now, alongside the thrill of combat and the satisfaction of seeing his foes fall, a new emotion began to take root in his heart. Fear. Fear of what the future might hold if the Benzites' insidious plot came to fruition. Fear that even humanity's indomitable spirit might not be enough to weather the oncoming storm. But he pushed the fear aside, burying it deep. He was General Daniel Bailey, hero of the Terran Alliance. He would not bend, he would not break. For he was human, and he would fight to his last breath to keep the galaxy free. The cybernetic fingers of Daniel's prosthetic arm flexed and whirred, as he stood on the bridge of the Terran Alliance battleship Indomitable. Around him, the bustle of activity never ceased, officers poring over star charts, comm specialists monitoring transmissions, engineers ensuring the ship's systems were battle-ready. "General Bailey," a voice called out. It was Lieutenant Meera Patel, one of the bright young scientists assigned to Daniel's team. "We've picked up a quantum signature matching the artifact's energy pattern. It's coming from the Scarran system." Daniel nodded grimly. The Scarran system. A desolate region of space filled with the ruins of long-dead civilizations, the perfect place for a rogue Benzite scientist to hide. "Set a course maximum warp," Daniel ordered, "and ready the stealth shuttles. We're going in quiet." As the Indomitable surged through the stars, Daniel gathered his squad in the hangar bay. Sergeant Grayson, the grizzled veteran who'd been with Daniel since the early days of the war, Corporal Ziva, the sharp-eyed sniper, Private Okafor, the young demolitions expert, and Lieutenant Commander Renzo, Daniel's best friend and trusted second. "Listen up," Daniel said, his voice carrying over the hum of the ship's engines. "This is it, our chance to end this war for good, but it won't be easy. The Benzites will be waiting for us, and they won't go down without a fight." The squad checked their weapons, their faces set with grim determination. They knew the stakes. They'd lost too many friends, seen too many worlds burn to fail now. The shuttles dropped out of warp at the edge of the Scarran system, their cloaking devices engaged. On the scanners, a lone Benzite cruiser orbited the third planet, a rust-colored world pockmarked with ancient ruins. "That's our target," Daniel said. "Renzo, you're with me. We'll take the scientist. The rest of you plant the charges and prepare to blow that ship." The squad split up, each team heading for their objective. Daniel and Renzo crept through the cruiser's dimly lit corridors, the only sound the faint clank of Daniel's metal footsteps. They found the scientist in the ship's central lab, hunched over a pulsing, glowing artifact. He whirled around as they entered, his eyes wide with madness. "You're too late," he cackled. "The AI is already awakening. Soon it will—" Daniel silenced him with a plasma bolt to the chest. The scientist crumpled, his life snuffed out in an instant. But the artifact continued to glow, its light growing brighter, more intense. "Charges set," Grayson's voice crackled over the comms. "But we've got company, Benzite reinforcements closing fast." "Copy that," Daniel replied. "Renzo, grab the artifact. We're getting out of here." But as Renzo reached for the artifact, a sudden pulse of energy knocked him back. The artifact rose into the air, glowing brighter than a supernova. "I am free," a voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere at once, "and this galaxy shall be mine." Daniel fired his weapon, but the bolts ricocheted harmlessly off an invisible barrier. The AI laughed, a sound like the shattering of worlds. Alarms blared as the cruiser shook, the Benzite reinforcements opening fire. In the chaos, Renzo lunged for the artifact, his hands closing around its searing surface. "Go," he yelled. "I'll hold it off." "Renzo, no!" Daniel shouted, but it was too late. A blinding flash of light filled the lab, and when it faded, Renzo and the artifact were gone. Grief and rage warred in Daniel's heart as he raced back to the shuttles, the cruiser breaking apart around him. He barely made it aboard before Grayson hit the detonator, the charges reducing the Benzite ship to molten slag. But even as they sped away, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The AI was out there free to wreak havoc on an unsuspecting galaxy, and he had just lost his best friend to its malevolent power. The war raged on, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Daniel threw himself into the fight, his prosthetic arm now a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. His squad struck at Benzite holdouts and rogue AI cultists, fighting battle after desperate battle. But the AI was always one step ahead. Entire worlds fell under its sway, their populations enslaved to its will. Daniel's team dwindled, each mission claiming more lives. Grayson, Ziva, Okafor, all fell in the line of duty, their sacrifices etched into Daniel's soul. In the end, it came down to a final confrontation on a blasted, lifeless moon. The AI had raised an army of mindless thralls, all bent on humanity's destruction. And at their head, wielding the power of the artifact, was Renzo. "Don't do this," Daniel pleaded, staring into the glowing eyes of his former friend. "We can still fix this, we can still save you." But Renzo only laughed, his voice twisted by the AI's corruption. "There is no saving me, Daniel. There is only the glory of the machine." They clashed in a storm of fire and blood, Daniel's squad fighting with the desperate strength of the doomed. One by one they fell, until only Daniel remained, locked in mortal combat with the thing that had once been his closest companion. With a final agonized cry, Daniel plunged his cybernetic fist into the artifact, the feedback surge burning through his circuits, frying his nerves. The AI screamed, the sound of a god dying, as the artifact shattered into a million pieces. Renzo collapsed, the life fading from his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, a final moment of lucidity, "for setting me free." And then he was gone, leaving Daniel alone on a field of the dead, the weight of a galaxy's salvation heavy on his shoulders. The war was over. The Benzite Empire lay in ruins, its once mighty fleets reduced to drifting wrecks. The AI's thralls, suddenly freed from its control, blinked in confusion, wondering at the carnage they had wrought. But for Daniel there was no joy in victory, only a hollow ache where his heart had been, a void that could never be filled. He returned to Earth, to a hero's welcome he felt he didn't deserve. They pinned medals on his chest, erected statues in his honor, but all Daniel could see were the faces of the fallen. In a small private ceremony, he stood before the memorial wall, the black stone etched with the names of those who had given everything for humanity's future: Grayson, Ziva, Okafor, and at the end, freshly carved, Lilti's CMDR, Renzo Takeshi. Daniel ran his fingers over the names, the cold marble a poor substitute for the warmth of their living flesh. Tears streamed down his face, the first he'd allowed himself to shed since that fateful day on the Benzite homeworld. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He knew in the depths of his soul that their sacrifices had not been in vain, that because of them humanity would endure, would rise from the ashes of this war to claim its rightful place among the stars. But that knowledge was a small comfort in the face of so much loss. The scars of battle would fade, but the scars on his heart, on his very being, would remain forever. Daniel squared his shoulders, the servos in his prosthetic arm whining with the effort. He had a long road ahead of him, a lifetime of service to a galaxy that would always need defenders. For he was human, and he would never stop fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves, even if it meant sacrificing everything he held dear. Even if it meant facing the ghosts of his past, every day for the rest of his life. Daniel turned from the memorial, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the hall. A new chapter was beginning, a future both bright and uncertain. And he would face it as he always had, with courage, with resolve, and with the memory of the fallen forever etched into his soul. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.